Every afternoon, children walked home from Brookhaven Elementary School in little groups. Some rode bicycles. Some skipped along the sidewalks. Some collected interesting leaves, or unusually shaped stones, or sticks that looked far too useful to leave behind. Adults rarely noticed. Children noticed everything. Behind the school, between two rows of tall oak trees, an old footpath disappeared into the woods. Years ago, it had connected Pine Street with Willow Lane. Grandparents still remembered using it. Parents vaguely remembered it from childhood. Most younger families didn't know it existed at all. Nature had been quietly reclaiming it. Brambles stretched across the narrow trail. Tree roots pushed through the earth. The little wooden bridge over Miller Creek had long since collapsed. Each winter, fallen branches made the path a little harder to find. Eventually, people stopped using it. Then, they stopped remembering it. Only the children still played near its entrance, although none of them had ever walked all the way through. One warm Tuesday afternoon, Oliver's football bounced off a goalpost, rolled across the grass, disappeared into the bushes. "Oh no," Oliver groaned. "My new football." 4 children pushed through the overgrown branches together. Oliver, Mia, Ben, and little Sophie. "I think it rolled this way," Ben called. Sophie pointed ahead. "There's something wooden." The children stepped carefully through the undergrowth, then stopped. Before them, hidden beneath vines and moss, lay the remains of a tiny wooden bridge. Only a few planks were still in place. The handrails had almost disappeared beneath climbing ivy. On the other side, they could just make out the old path winding deeper into the trees. Oliver looked around. "I didn't know this was here." Ben carefully stepped closer. "My granddad told me about a shortcut. I thought he was making it up." Mia looked through the trees. "If this went all the way through," she pointed ahead, "it would come out near Willow Lane." Noah, the oldest of the group, arrived a few moments later, his bicycle resting on one shoulder as he ducked beneath the low branches. "What are you all doing?" Oliver pointed. "We found a path." Noah looked at the broken bridge. "Not anymore." For a few moments, nobody spoke. They simply looked at the forgotten trail. It was peaceful, beautiful, and somehow, a little sad. Then Mia quietly asked, "Why not anymore?" The others looked at her, then back at the path. Noah shrugged. "The bridge is broken." Then pointed at the fallen branches. "And nobody clears these." Sophie looked thoughtfully at the stream. "It isn't gone." Oliver frowned. "What isn't?" "The path." She smiled. "It's only hiding." The 4 older children looked at the winding trail again. For the first time, they weren't looking at what was broken. They were looking at what was still there. Oliver slowly smiled. "I wonder," he looked at the others, "if we could find it again." Nobody answered immediately, but nobody walked away either. Without saying another word, Ben picked up the first fallen branch. Oliver dragged a second one aside. Sophie began gathering smaller sticks into neat little piles. Mia brushed leaves away from the first few stones that still marked the edge of the old path. No speeches, no plans, no grown-ups, just 4 children, doing the next obvious thing. As the afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees, the entrance to the forgotten path became visible again, only a few meters, but it was enough to see where it wanted to go. Far above them, a blackbird began to sing. The little stream continued its gentle journey beneath the broken bridge, and for the first time in many years, the old path welcomed footsteps once again. The following afternoon, Oliver arrived carrying an old pair of gardening gloves that were much too large for him. His father had used them years ago. Now they slipped halfway down Oliver's fingers. He didn't mind. Mia brought a small hand brush. It isn't really for gardening, she admitted. My mum uses it to clean flower pots. She smiled. But I think dirt is dirt. Ben appeared pulling a little red wagon. Inside, there was a bucket, a length of old rope. A small folding saw that his grandfather had already taught him to use safely, and 3 apples. What are the apples for? Oliver asked. Ben shrugged. I got hungry while packing. Sophie arrived last. As always, she carried something nobody expected. A small notebook, half filled with drawings. I thought, she said quietly, we could remember what the path used to look like. Oliver smiled. How? She pointed toward the trees. We'll draw what we discover. Nobody laughed. With Sophie, ideas that sounded unusual often became the best ones. That afternoon, they cleared another 20 meters. Branches were dragged into neat piles. Loose stones were returned to the edges of the path. Leaves revealed the worn footprints of generations long gone. Every few minutes, someone discovered something. Look, Ben called. I found the old wooden edge. Mia brushed away more leaves. There are stepping stones here. Oliver carefully lifted a fallen branch. I think there used to be a sign. Only a weathered wooden post remained. Its lettering had disappeared years before. Sophie sketched it anyway. It's part of the story, she explained. Nobody argued. By Thursday, the entrance looked completely different. For the first time in years, sunlight reached the ground. Wildflowers hidden beneath the brambles quietly lifted their heads toward the light. Did we plant those? Ben asked. No, Mia answered. They were already here. They just needed room. For a moment, none of the children spoke. They simply looked at the tiny flowers. Somehow, that made the whole project feel worthwhile. On Friday, they reached the broken bridge. The stream beneath it was only a few feet wide, too wide to jump safely, too narrow to ignore. Oliver carefully stepped onto the remaining plank. It creaked immediately. He stepped back. No, he said. We're not using that. The others nodded. No discussion. Some things were obvious. Ben sat down on a nearby rock. So, what do we do now? Nobody answered immediately. The little stream flowed quietly beneath them. Then Sophie looked downstream. There are lots of flat stones. Oliver followed her gaze. Mia smiled. You think we can make stepping stones? Sophie nodded. Until we can make something better. The others looked at one another. Oliver grinned. I like that plan. The next hour became the hardest work they had done so far. Each stone was heavier than it looked. Some slipped. Some wobbled. Several had to be moved twice. Nobody complained. When the last stone finally rested firmly beneath the shallow water, Ben cautiously stepped across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He reached the opposite bank, turned around, raised both arms. It works. The others crossed one by one, slowly, carefully, smiling a little more with each step. When Sophie reached the other side, she looked back toward the old bridge. We didn't fix it, Oliver smiled. No, we just found another way. For a long moment, they stood together beneath the trees, looking farther along the forgotten path than anyone had in years. They had not reached Willow Lane, not yet. But for the first time, they believed they would. By the beginning of the following week, the path had changed. Not completely, but enough that anyone walking past the entrance could tell someone cared. On Monday afternoon, two younger girls stopped beside the opening in the bushes. One whispered, "What are they doing?" The other shrugged, "I don't know." They watched for a while. Oliver was pulling ivy away from an old fence post. Mia was brushing soil from the edge of the path. Ben was rolling another flat stone toward the stream. Sophie sat on a fallen log, carefully drawing the old bridge in her notebook. Finally, the smaller girl gathered her courage. "Can we help?" The four older children looked up. Oliver smiled first. "Of course." She looked relieved. "What should we do?" Oliver looked around. There was still so much to do. Then he pointed toward the entrance. "See those little branches?" She nodded. "If you move them into one pile, everyone else can walk more easily." The two girls smiled, immediately began carrying little armfuls of twigs. Some were hardly bigger than pencils. To them, they felt important. The older children noticed something interesting. The smaller children worked differently. They weren't strong enough to move logs. They weren't tall enough to cut vines. But they noticed every little thing. "This stone is loose. There's broken glass here. I found another flower. I think ants live underneath this one." Soon, the path wasn't only becoming clearer, it was becoming safer. The next afternoon, 3 more children appeared. Nobody invited them. Word had simply spread across the playground. "They're fixing the old path." "No," another child corrected. "They're opening it." Mia looked up. She smiled. "I like that better." Each child somehow found a job. One gathered litter into a bucket. Another straightened the little piles of branches. 2 brothers carried small stones to strengthen the stepping stones across the creek. Sophie began asking everyone to draw something in her notebook. "What for?" Ben asked. "So we'll remember." She smiled. "How we built it." One page showed muddy boots. Another, a robin sitting on the old fence. Another, the first sunflower growing beside the entrance. Another, Ben balancing with 3 stones in his arms. Oliver laughed. "You even drew me falling into the stream." Sophie nodded very seriously. "It happened." "It did," Oliver admitted. And everyone laughed. By the second Friday, more than a dozen children had spent at least one afternoon on the path. Some stayed for hours, others only for 15 minutes. It didn't matter. Everyone left having made something, just a little better. Near the end of this week, they finally reached the far end. The bushes opened. Sunlight flooded through. Beyond them lay Willow Lane. Nobody spoke for several moments. The children simply looked from one neighborhood to the other, then quietly smiled. "It really goes somewhere." Oliver looked back through the trees. The path curved gently behind them, past the stepping stones, past the old bridge, past the wildflowers, past every place where someone had quietly helped. Then he looked toward Willow Lane again. It always did. The path hadn't changed. Only the people using it had. The first person to use the reopened path wasn't one of the children. It was Mr. Harris, the elderly gentleman who walked his golden retriever every morning. On Tuesday, his dog suddenly stopped beside the old entrance, tail wagging, nose already disappearing between the bushes. "What's caught your attention?" Mr. Harris laughed. He gently pushed a few branches aside, then stopped. "The path," he whispered. He hadn't walked it in nearly 30 years. Curious, he followed, slowly, carefully. The stepping stones crossed the little creek. The branches had been neatly stacked. The edges of the path were clearly visible again. Someone had even placed smooth stones beside the muddy places. He smiled all the way to Willow Lane. The next morning, he brought his wife. "It's shorter than going around Oak Road," she said. He nodded. "And prettier." Neither of them had the slightest idea who had reopened it. By the end of the week, other people had discovered it. A young mother pushing a stroller, two sisters walking to piano lessons, a teenager taking his bicycle home, a retired couple collecting blackberries. Without realizing it, the children had quietly changed hundreds of small journeys. One afternoon, Oliver and Mia sat on the little bench they had built together from two old tree stumps and a weathered plank. People walked past from both directions. Some smiled. Some simply enjoyed the shade. Some stopped to watch the stream for a while. Nobody asked who had built the bench. Nobody asked who had cleared the branches. Nobody even seemed to wonder. The path simply felt as though it had always belonged there. Ben watched a father helping his little daughter step across the stones. He smiled. "I like that." "What?" Oliver asked. "He doesn't know." Ben looked toward the stepping stones. "That children built those." Oliver smiled. "I don't think it matters." Ben watched the little girl safely reach the other side. She laughed. Her father laughed too. "No," Ben agreed quietly. "I suppose it doesn't." At that moment, Sophie came running along the path. She was carrying something behind her back. "I finished it." She carefully held up a small wooden board. The paint wasn't perfect. Some letters leaned slightly. One corner was a little crooked. Across the front, she had painted one simple word. "Welcome." The children looked at it for a long moment. "It's nice." Mia smiled. "No," Oliver corrected gently. "It's enough." Together, they fastened the little sign to the old fence post at the entrance. Nobody measured whether it was perfectly straight. Nobody cared. The little sign simply stood there, welcoming everyone who entered. That afternoon, a little boy whom none of them had ever met stopped beside it. He slowly read the word aloud. "Welcome." He smiled, then walked happily down the path. Communities are often built long before anyone gives them a name. Sometimes, children simply begin because helping makes perfect sense to them. And sometimes, all it takes is clearing the way back to one another.